Well, I've had difficult acts to follow in my life, but that's really something. I'm really honored to be here, and I feel so much the words of the Rabbi Wolberg about humility, and I feel very humbled to be here and honored to be in your presence, and I'm very grateful for that. But I want you all to know something. And I'm very serious when I say this. It's the first time that I've been here. I hope I'll be invited back, but I am not responsible for the food being late. It's not my job, but there it is. But like a miracle, it is here. So we're grateful for that, and we're grateful for all of God's blessings, of course, and one of which is my ability to be here and speak with you tonight about public safety in the city of New York as seen from the eyes of a district attorney in Staten Island. And I do so, again, humbly, and I do want to thank formally Rabbi Mendy Moroznik, who is the Executive Vice President of the Rabbinical Alliance of America, and Scott Moore, who is my friend, as you heard, and from Kojo, and a personal friend. They do so much for the community in Staten Island as part of Kojo and in individual ways. But when you think about the word mitzvah, that every week they're doing a mitzvah of food and giving out food to those who need it with their food bank. And in a few weeks they're going to do one in memory of my parents, my mother and father, who we lost this past December. And their friendship and support during that difficult time for me and my family is something that I'll never forget, and they don't do things with big fanfare. They take to heart the words of Rabbi Wolberg about humility and about being humble and not being haughty, and I take that as well. And so Rabbi Wolberg, I want to thank you for those incredible words. And Rabbi Klaas, no one's ever said as many nice things about me as you said here this evening, so I want you to know how grateful I am for that. And Rabbi Blank, the Director of Programming for the Chaplaincy Commission and External Affairs of the Rabbinical Alliance, thank you for having me as well. Rabbi Mark Moy-Schmerler, who's the Administrative Director of the Rabbinical Alliance of America, thank you as well. And this is the list that Mendy gave me, so if there's anyone that I should have thanked personally,
Blame Mendy.
To see you. Blame Mendy, don't blame me. You've been introduced to James Clinton, who's from my office. James, say hello.
Hello.
Part of the community partnership unit. And Rabbi Blank did such a beautiful job talking about the men and women of the New York City Police Department. And we think, of course, of all the people in emergency services, both who work for the city and those who work as volunteers and what they do for us. But we've learned too poignantly in the last week the sacrifice that those men and women make in the NYPD, as those two young officers who both will be raised to the rank of detective first grade, and what they mean to us. And I want to introduce to you two real live members of the New York City Police Department. We have Sergeant Matthew Muscarella, who's here, Detective first grade Nicholas Arhekos, and if I told you how many years they've dedicated to the safety of the people of New York City and now to the DA and his family and the people of Staten Island, I would embarrass them because they're much younger. What am I saying now? Decades they've been out there keeping us safe. And so they are the embodiment of that spirit of the men and women in blue, and we're very grateful for them, for what they do for us. So let's give them another round. So let me just talk a little bit about what I see going on in the world of public safety and criminal justice, and it's become a very important topic because we've become concerned for the first time in decades for our safety. And that's general across the board for all the people of the city of New York. We're worried if we take the subway or the bus, walk down the street, what could happen, and it's for a host of reasons, but I'd like to talk to you about what it is that we need to keep in mind. And for me, it's quite simply, it's a sense of balance in the criminal justice system. Mendy talked a little bit about that balance when he talked about the law being given from Moses, as we say, or Moshe, as you say. But that balance is what we're missing a little bit, because right now it seems that, for too many people, you either have to be anti-police and anti-law enforcement, or you have to be pro-police and believe that nobody should be given a second chance, and you have to have the strict arm of the law. And both of those statements are ridiculous, right? You have to have balance. We disagree with that in my office, and we disagree with that in what we do every day in the Richmond County District Attorney's Office. Our job is to find the balance, and that's the key to ensuring public safety and fair justice for all. That's true of every citizen, that's true of every police officer, it's true of everyone, and that's what we want as God's children, to have fairness, to have justice, to have dignity, and to toil in peace, as Rabbi Kless said. So how do we find that balance? And how do we find the misbalance, right? You've seen lately a lot of the talk about one of my colleagues in another borough put out a statement of policies that seem to say that an individual can just change all the laws, rewrite the laws, if you will, Rabbi, and that's not what laws are. We have lawmakers who write the law, and we as DAs have to implement the law and follow the law. And so there you saw that balance was lost. And in many ways, this loss of balance, whether it's the particular DA maybe going a little too far in the statement, or maybe misstating what he meant, we'll find out as time goes on, or individuals thinking that judges should no longer have discretion in keeping us safe and examining the conduct of individuals, or that youngsters who pick up a gun and use it as another shouldn't be prosecuted under the law. Those things are out of balance, and that's why there's a sense of lawlessness, because we've lost accountability. People feel like they won't be held accountable, and so they act in a certain way that is antisocial, against the norms that we all share in our Judeo-Christian heritage, and therefore we've lost our balance a little bit, and that's why we see things a little out of whack. There's no other way to say it. And many of these policies simply roll out a welcome mat for would-be criminals. And it's sort of Pollyannish to think that you can wave a magic wand and say that crimes did not occur. Crimes don't exist. And on the other hand, it's wrong to say that the system is always perfect. It could not be improved. It could not be made better. No. People since time, I hope this is not blasphemy to say this, but since the time of Cain and Abel, people have committed crimes, and there needs to be justice for that. And at the same time, that system should always be fair and treat each individual fairly and justly. And we must strive to make that system better, so that we can strive for a day when crime doesn't exist and victims of crime don't exist as well. Too often in these discussions, people are saying, well, I'm pro this or I'm pro that. Well, what about the victims, right? What about the victims of crime? If you could have seen the widow of Officer Rivera at St. Patrick's Cathedral last week, and to hear her pain and her anguish. And today I was at a meeting at City Hall with the mayor and the new police commissioner, and they were still shaken to their core because they were in the hospital with Jason Rivera's widow, and they had to tell her that he wasn't coming home. And we're going to do that again on Wednesday for Detective Mora's family as well. And so we can't forget the victims, and we can't forget justice and fairness, and we must operate in reality. And that's what we try to do in the office of the district attorney every day. Now, we also understand, and listen, if someone commits a serious crime, they should be prosecuted in that traditional sense. But we also understand that many activities that we consider against social norms are driven by other factors, like mental illness, like addiction illness, like breakdown of the family structure, like developmental disabilities. And we have to work in our justice system to take those individuals and connect them to a different place, not always standing in front of a judge and getting convicted of a misdemeanor and going out again and committing that same behavior, but trying to connect them to addiction services if they suffer from addiction illness, mental health services if that's the root cause of their behavior, and of course up to a certain point. I'm happy to say that as the Staten Island DA, I probably, you talk to us all, I probably come across as the toughest, right, or the most law and order of all the 5 DAs. over 40% of the people on Staten Island who commit a crime receive diversionary treatment. So 40% of the people get treatment for their addiction, treatment for their mental health, because I don't want them coming back, and I don't want them committing the same behavior. And so many of the behaviors we see, unfortunately, it's so serious it pales in comparison. But when someone appears out of their mind and they push someone off a subway platform, that must be prosecuted as a capital crime, which it is. But it happened because that individual wasn't connected to services maybe the 24 times before when he committed petty thefts, criminal mischief, trespassing. You follow me, Rabbi? You know what I mean? Am I making sense? As long as the rabbi says yes, I'm okay, right? I got a new rabbi, Mindy, I'm sorry. Beautiful words.
You're a room full of new rabbis.
So that's the philosophy we bring, and that's the balance that we bring to our office. And I just want to talk to you about a few issues in particular. And Scott mentioned this about our hate crimes task force and the work that we do in particular against anti-Semitism and the work that we do against hate crimes on Staten Island. We've seen too much of this, and when the shooting happened in Pittsburgh at the Bread of Life synagogue, we quickly, the Tree of Life, synagogue in Pittsburgh, Scott called me and we talked with Mendy, and we formulated this hate crimes task force. And we do a couple things. We come together as a group and try to initiate programs to bring a word of tolerance and love and peace into the community. We had a great program at St. John's University with in conjunction with the Holocaust Museum in Washington and the National District Attorneys Association. We brought in a really wonderful program, right? 3 hours we were at the school, examining the role of police and prosecutors in the Holocaust and what role they played and how the decisions were made along the way. They didn't all start out by saying we're going to murder 6 million Jews and 20 million people. They started out making decisions. Little steps turned into big steps. It was I still am amazing. Right, it was so impressive, and that's what we're doing sort of in the positive side. And then when hate crimes do occur on Staten Island, we quickly spring into action. In my office, hate crimes are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. As you know, if someone commits a crime that's a hate crime, it sort of bumps up or aggravates, we call it, or steps up the charges. So in my office, anyone who's charged with a hate crime felony, there will be no plea bargaining, there'll be no one down, there'll be no deals made. They will be held to the full account of the law and prosecuted. Unfortunately, my brothers and ladies, too often those crimes that we see, even in Staten Island, are anti-Semitic crimes of anti-Semitism. But we're out there working, and if a swastika is drawn on the back of a synagogue, we're out there painting it over as a community with 50 people all holding the roller together to send the word that behavior will not be tolerated. It will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, but let's eradicate that behavior by teaching people about tolerance and understanding, and that we're all God's children. We had a great case where we prosecuted a woman who was a member of the New Jersey European Heritage Association, and she was posting horrific anti-Semitic posters across the island and swastikas on public property, which in itself is an automatic aggravated crime. And we did that working together with the NYPD's racially and ethnically motivated extremism unit, or REMI as we call them. The NYPD is an amazing organization, and they have a whole unit that's focused on extremism and anti-Semitism, and we did a great job with that. So we're working on hate crimes. Guns are another issue, I know. Gun crimes, I should say, is another issue that concerns all of us. And people want to know what to do with it, but I think it's quite simple, really. And here, I'll tell you why the proof is in the pudding. In Staten Island, if someone is charged with the crime of possessing or using a gun illegally, we ask for bail in every case, and we prosecute every case, and we ask for incarceration in every case. And while gun crimes are up dramatically in the other 4 boroughs in the city of New York, in Staten Island in the last year, gun crimes are down over 10%. And it's a big jump because, in numbers, because the year before was the highest number we had. Part of the number, people say, well, why do we have a rise in gun crime? Part of it was the police department had to deal with COVID. They had to deal with the riots that Mendy talked about. They had to deal with changing policing strategies for a host of reasons, and so arrests were down. But now in Staten Island, the arrests are up, the prosecutions are up, and gun crime is down. So people say, what do we do about it on the initial phase? Look to us in Staten Island, we can tell you what you do. Sometimes the old-fashioned methods work. But at the same time, we are also asking ourselves, well, why are all these young people getting their hands on illegal guns and carrying them and using them? And that's a much more complicated discussion that we have continuing to have with community leaders, faith-based leaders, the schools, and youth groups to figure that out. And so we're working on it, and we won't rest until all New Yorkers are safe. Another issue people talk about, well, why are there more homeless now on the streets? And unfortunately, the prior administration, the mayor's prior administration, ended the outreach services that the men and women of the New York City Police Department were doing. And we've got to advocate for them to do that again so that we can sort of break that cycle of homelessness and get the people who are out there, usually because of mental health concerns, issues, sometimes because of poverty, and get them to connected to services. Now don't worry, guys. I don't think that every problem in the world can be solved by the New York City Police Department, just most of them. Let's hear it for the Now, what they didn't tell you was that this is not my first job. I was in elected office. I've been an attorney for 35 years. My wife, Judith, reminds me that my first job is being a loyal and dutiful and hardworking husband, so that's something I don't forget. But I was also a member of the City Council, and I was also a member of the United States Congress. They forgot to tell you that when I was on you're saving that. When I was on the floor of the House, I led the floor debate to pass the first legislation that established the Iron Dome program. And I have a long history of supporting not only the Jewish community in Staten Island and New York City, but also in Israel. And I just want to conclude with a quote from Martin Luther King. I didn't know this, but recently we did a hate crime event on Staten Island because we had a hate crime occur, and we had to come together and speak out about it. And one of the pastors there reminded us that just a few weeks before his death, Martin Luther King made a speech to, I guess, the Rabbinical Association of the United States, the American organization, which, again, I'm honored to be here. And this is what he said. It says, "It seems to me that all people of goodwill must now take a stand for that which is just, that which is righteous. Indeed, in the words of the prophet Amos, let justice roll down like the waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Our priorities are mixed up. Our national purposes are confused. Our policies are confused. And there must somehow be a reordering of priorities, policies, and purposes. I hope as we discuss these issues tonight that together we will be able to find some guidelines and some sense of direction." Amazing that he said that, right? In 1968, and it could apply to today, how we look at things and policies and programs, and we've lost that balance, and I think that's what he was speaking to. He went on to say, "I think the only answer to this is for all people to condemn injustice wherever it exists." I'm going to repeat that. This is going to be the motto for our hate crimes task force. Yes, I think the only answer to this is for all people to condemn injustice wherever it exists. I think it is necessary to say that what is basic and what is needed in the Middle East is peace. Peace for Israel, peace for the Arab side, and for the whole world. And that peace for Israel means security, and we must stand with all of our might to protect its right to exist, its territorial integrity. I see Israel, and never mind saying it, as one of the great outposts of democracy in the world, and a marvelous example of what can be done, how desert land almost can be transformed into an oasis of brotherhood and democracy, brotherhood and sisterhood and democracy. Peace for Israel means security, and that security must be a reality. Peace for us to be able to live in our homes safely, free from crimes of hatred, crimes of violence, crimes of avarice, crimes of cruelty. That's something that we're all entitled to as well as the children of God. I am honored to be with you here. I'm inspired by the words that I heard so far, and thank you very much for giving me your attention. I also want to say this, can I do this now?
Yes.
That I know that I'm on the program, and that my name is printed on the same piece of paper as a great man who graced the halls of this building and this community, and that was Rabbi Gershon Tannenbaum. And so I'm honored to give a posthumous distinction to him and his family. His sons are here, right? And come on up here.
Agudath and Yisrael. Scott?
Got it. So from the Office of the District Attorney of Richmond County, there's a certificate of recognition presented to Rabbi Gershon Tannenbaum in posthumous distinction on the occasion of the Rabbinical Alliance of America's dinner here at the Agudath of Borough Park West, and is presented on behalf of the people of the Borough of Staten Island in recognition of 50 years of distinguished service, outstanding leadership, and renowned scholarly contributions to the Jewish community of Staten Island, the rest of the city of New York, and beyond, presented by me this day. A request.
Yeah, well, okay, look here, first up there. Now over here. One more. Okay. Got it.